Hi guys, just a quick note before we start. I recorded this day before Adrian Wojnarowski officially broke the story that Anthony Davis got traded to the LA Lakers. So part of the segment, I will talk about a three-team trade that I thought made a ton of sense involving the Pelicans, the Lakers, and the Miami Heat. Unfortunately, I didn't get that fully right. He did get traded to the Lakers. It was more or less the package that I thought the Lakers would give up. I didn't think that they were going to give up Josh Hart, to be honest with you, but I guess he did have injuries towards the second half of the season. I did say that the Lakers would keep Kuzma, and that was probably the best asset to go alongside with LeBron James. So once again, the trade was Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, and 3 first-round draft picks, 19, 21, and 23, I will guess. Probably all 3 unprotected. For the Pelicans, this was a huge haul, to be honest with you. It was probably the best they could get, and I think it was just too complicated getting a 3-team trade done before the draft. So hopefully you'll still enjoy the rest of the episode. I guess I was half right, 60% right, not right. Nonetheless, can get them all. Hi guys, welcome to the first ever Fengshui Basketball show. My name is Stephen Yuan and I will be guiding you throughout this process. Today we'll outline 5 predictions that I have for the next week or 2 transactions of the NBA leading up to free agency. The Fengshui Basketball show was originally conceptualized as being this behind the door cultural focus on the NBA. Because I think a lot of the times the other shows are focused on the X's and O's, the screens that people set, the plays that they run, and how hot somebody is shooting, etc., etc. And, I wanted to take a more nuanced look at inter-team dynamics and, especially player movements in the offseason, something that interests me a lot. And with the Toronto Raptors having won the 2019 NBA championship, we're officially in the 2020 season right now, so I thought what better time to start than now. About me personally, I have 0 credentials to do this. I'm not an NBA beat writer. I don't cover the NBA. I don't have sources, but I consume this content for hours a day, probably just like the person who's watching this right now or listening to this. I love the sport. I love the game. And I started writing relatively serious last year. I thought the Bucks would actually win the East. I wrote an article where you can find the link below where I said the Milwaukee Bucks would win the East in 2019 if Giannis can become a rim protecting 5, and they really buy into Coach Bud's system, which is more or less what happened. I think this was at a time when everybody and their mom was super fixated on the Boston Celtics winning last year, and I just didn't see that happening, right? I thought adding Kyrie and Gordon Hayward back into the mix would really have chemistry issues with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and to a lesser extent Terry Rozier. But I thought they would still be good. I thought Boston would kind of be a 3 seed. They actually dropped down to about 4 or 5 seed. And in addition, I thought the Orlando Magic were actually going to squeak into the playoffs, which they did. So that was really cool. I thought the length and the system that Coach Clifford installed would give Orlando a chance if they could stay healthy. And I know that franchise will start for a playoff berth for a while. I will say that I was incredibly wrong about the Toronto Raptors. I thought Toronto would drop down to about a 6 or a 7 seed. It's fairly embarrassing in hindsight, definitely, but I didn't think that Kawhi Leonard was going to be this healthy. I had no idea Pascal Siakam was going to be a borderline star. I thought DeMar DeRozan's departure would really affect Kyle Lowry, when in reality it didn't really too much. Huge kudos to Toronto. I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada, so this is super exciting for me to watch Toronto win. But I didn't think they were going to be this good, to be honest with you. But I was still right 3 out of 4 times. And once again, you can find the article below if you want to have a read of what I posted last September. So just entering the 2020 season, I was really hoping to kind of give a different outlook in terms of how I view the NBA. I have a background in sports betting. I was betting on the NBA since I was about 18, 19 years old for 2-3 years, and I've taken the last 6 years off. So for me, setting up this show and this podcast was really interesting. I think as we progress in the off season and lead towards the season, we'll talk more about win totals, championship bets, where value is at, how I bet games, what lines I look at, how I look at the lines. So thank you so much for checking this out. I think for now this will be a weekly thing. Maybe that might increase as time goes by, but hopefully, you'll appreciate the takes that I have. And if not, then, thanks so much for checking this out anyways. So the first take I want to say is that it's probably the one I'm most comfortable with. I really think Kevin Durant will re-sign with the Warriors this summer by opting into his player option, which I think is about $31 million. It just doesn't make sense to me personally any other way. I think like most people, when I saw the injury happen at the game, I was shocked. I was actually really angry because I thought there was no reason for Kevin Durant to play in this if he was actually hurt. Multiple reports have come out afterwards where they've said that, the medical staff has cleared him and Kevin Durant's team isn't mad at Golden State or their medical staff, and it was his personal decision to do so, right? But having said that, he has a player option, once again, for about $31 million. He's going to be out for pretty much the entire 12 months. If I was Kevin Durant right now, this is about as good as his personal persona has been, right? It went from Kevin Durant as a cupcake to, he's a warrior. He's about as strong as it gets. He showed so much heart by just coming out and playing for the 11 minutes that he did. So, in terms of how he is viewed, this is about as good as KD has had it. And, I think he's always had a strong relationship with his teammates, and the coaching staff and the medical staff. I never thought the summer was as clear cut as some people have made it. A lot of people like Stephen A. and whoever else have said he's gone to the Knicks or, he's gone to the Clippers. I never thought it was as clear cut. I think KD is about playing basketball and, he felt undervalued, sure. But I think that narrative really changed this game. Right, and going back to his injury, you have a torn Achilles or something like that, at which point he'll be gone for the entire year. Right, so if you're Kevin Durant, you have $31 million guaranteed. Sure, you can probably sign somewhere max for 4 to 5 years, but the NBA changes so fast that the next 3 to 5 years of your deal are really not guaranteed in terms of how your team and how the league will look like. All right, on to prediction number 2. I think Kawhi Leonard will stay in Toronto. After just winning the title and with how the fan base and the organization, how your teammates have treated you, I don't know how you can leave Toronto, right? I know he said that he wants to be out in LA, but I really don't think either one of the LA options is as attractive to him as Toronto. I'm very bearish on the Clippers, unlike a lot of people. I thought they got by this year by catching a lot of teams off guard. They have a lot of medium to medium good players, and if they acquire somebody, they would probably have to do some house cleaning. And at the end of the day, they're the Clippers. If he went to the Lakers, he'd play second fiddle to LeBron. I really don't think that's where Kawhi is at this stage of his career. I think he really wants to cement himself as the best player in the league, which he may just be, to be honest with you. ESPN ran a really interesting story this week leading up to Game 6 about Kawhi's background. And there was a story in there in terms of why he went to San Diego State and how the assistant coaches at San Diego State went out and watched him play and how he thought they were really genuine and honest. And all he wanted to see was that they got a shot. He had a shot to be drafted to the NBA if he went to San Diego State. And I forgot what the player was, but, I think there was a player there who might have gotten drafted in the second round. So what that tells me is Kawhi really cares about being in the right place where people value him, where people, more or less adore him, and where he is treated well. I think a lot of us understand that. And I think in Toronto, at this point, he's the undisputed alpha. He's on a team that is, built to win this year again, right? Toronto can more or less bring back the same team. Everybody's on a player option or they're on a team option. or they're on the contract. And I think the only person that's missing is Danny Green. Danny Green's $10 million, but I'm sure they could convince Danny to take a mid-level exception or something for about $5 or $6 million in exchange for another run at a championship. He seems like he's having fun. He seems like he's emotional in Toronto, and I actually expect Kawhi to sign a 1-and-1 this summer. Maybe he'll sign a max, but more likely a 1-and-1 deal and see how this year goes, right? Because you have Kyle Lowry, Marcus Gasol, they're getting up there in age. Serge Ibaka is roughly getting up there in age, and Fred VanVleet is kind of getting his prime. And another year of Pascal Siakam development would help them a lot, definitely. All right, so prediction number 3 is really when I'm going out on a limb. I'm going for moonshot. There's been a lot of rumors with AD in terms of going to the Knicks or the Lakers. I really think it has to be the Lakers because I don't think he's going to resign anywhere else. I don't think he's going to resign in Boston if Kyrie's leaving and he has to play along Jason Tatum, Al Horford. The Knicks really don't have anybody else. KD's going to be out for a year, right? So I think in terms of package, the Lakers really have the best package and the best assets. So the trade is as follows. It is the Los Angeles Lakers, the Miami Heat, and the New Orleans Pelicans, right? And the Lakers receive Goran Dragic, Ryan Anderson, and Anthony Davis. The Miami Heat receive Lonzo Ball and a 2021 Lakers pick, protected or non-protected. It'll probably be in the mid to low 20s. And the New Orleans Pelicans receive the following: the 4th overall pick this year from the Lakers, the 13th overall pick this year from the Miami Heat, Dion Waiters, Brandon Ingram, and Kelly Olynyk. Right, so from a cap standpoint, in order for this to work, the Pelicans will have to waive some players this year, and the Lakers, so Goran Dragic would have to opt into his contract with the Heat at $19 million, which I think is more than what he would get on the market. Right. In addition, he would get a chance to win a championship with LeBron James. So I think that's plausible, right? But in reality, this would have to happen, after the 29th. I think that's when Dragic gets to opt in on his contract, something like that. So starting from a Lakers standpoint, this makes a ton of sense. You get Anthony Davis. He's going to resign with you. That's really all there is to it, right? But, to add, cherry on the cupcake, you get to retain Kyle Kuzma and Josh Hart, which are two of the people that you have valued a lot. A lot of reports have come out that the Lakers do not want to part with Kuzma, and they shouldn't. I think Kuzma is a great scoring punch, at the worst off its bench. I think he's still 23, 24 years old, so he can develop. And you get Goran Dragic and Ryan Anderson, both on expiring contracts for the final year. So you maintain that cap flexibility moving forward from 2021. And I think both are actually pretty good fit with LeBron James, right? Goran can play on or off ball. He's a very good spot-up shooter. He can play decent defense. Ryan Anderson is essentially a poor man's Kevin Love. He can get you 15 minutes a game, shoot 2 to 5 threes and make them, sometimes give you a 20-point game. They're both kind of in the points of their career right now where they want to win. And as we've stated above, the 2020 NBA season really is a crapshoot. So a team with LeBron James, Goran Dragic, Ryan Anderson, Anthony Davis, Kyle Kuzma, Josh Hart, plus some fillers is a pretty good team. That's a top 5 team in the NBA next year probably, especially with LeBron rested. So I think the Lakers definitely win in this situation. Moving on to the New Orleans Pelicans, with the Pelicans, now they essentially control the 1st, the 4th, and the 13th pick of this draft. So they get 3 picks in the lottery. And I think for them, relatively rebuilding, this is very important. Obviously, they're going to take Zion overall, but at the 4th slot, they can look at somebody like a Darius Garland to run the point and play with Drew Holiday. Or Jared Culver, who's a combo guard, can play the 2 or 3 spot, once again in combination with Holiday. But I would actually be really interested for them to take a shot and reach for Cam Reddish. I think Reddish was incredibly undervalued at Duke. He had to play behind RJ and Zion in terms of minutes and, handling for a 17, 18, 19-year-old, combo forward. That's really not something he's been used to his entire life. So I'm going to give Cam Reddish a pass for his year at Duke. But I think he fits really well in this situation. He gives great floor spacing, and his defense will probably develop, and obviously he's known Zion already. right? I think the key factors here is Kelly Olynyk, for better or worse, is actually a great fit with Zion. He can space the floor, he plays decent defense, and he's not a drama queen, right? So you can start Kelly at the 5, and Dion Waiters at worst, when healthy, is a scoring combo guard who can be your 6-man. Right, you have to remember that David Griffin was actually part of the team that drafted Dion 4th overall in the 2012 draft. So he's very familiar with Dion. He definitely has a high view on Dion. Otherwise, Cleveland would not have drafted them back then. Okay. Moving on to the Miami Heat, I actually think the Heat would probably be the biggest winner of this trade, because in the process they would clear $58 million in cap space, which is huge. The Heat have been crippled by cap flexibility or inflexibility over the last 3 to 4 years. Pat Riley is notorious for wanting to go after big players and big names, but he's just been unable to do so. So I think in 2019, with the emergence of Richardson, with the emergence of Winslow, whether as point or as small forward, with the emergence of Bam Adebayo, the Heat are actually in a process for the first time where they have a direction. Excuse me. They have a young core that is moving forward, and adding Lonzo Ball in there would really help, in my opinion. Right? Lonzo, when healthy, has a ton of potential, borderline all-star potential. The biggest issue of him is his health. Right? So for the Heat, you really kind of have to ask, they're going to lose the 13th overall pick this year. Is that worth getting Lonzo? Right? And in addition, they get the 2021 Lakers pick, which will probably be in the mid to low 20s. But Lonzo Ball has a very high ceiling, I think higher than whatever you can get at 13 this year. And more importantly, they cleared $58 million cap space. All right, moving on to our 4th prediction. We'll keep this one nice and short and sweet. It's very simple. I predict that Jimmy Butler will re-sign in Philadelphia for the max, which I believe is about 5 years and $188 million. That's a fuck ton of money. I think Jimmy, like Kawhi, really cares about being in an environment where he's appreciated and where he can win. And by signing this deal, he would be more or less committing to for the rest of the prime of Joel Embiid's time, right? He and Joel seem to have a very good relationship, both on and off the court. I think the Philadelphia role is perfect for Jimmy. I don't think Jimmy is the type that, is like Kobe, where he wants to dominate night in, night out. No, I think Jimmy's the type that wants to turn it on and dominate in the 4th quarter or during the playoffs. I think last year when he joined, we got to see that by his game-winning shots, or, whenever possessions ran to the 4th quarter, Jimmy would kind of just take over ball handling duties, run a pick and roll with Joel, and really take it from there. So I don't think this is a very big decision. There aren't really a ton of other fits for Butler. If you take him at his word, which is that he wants to be paid, appreciated, and win, he could go to LA, yes, with the Lakers. That would be plausible, but if they go through the AD trade, they're going to have a hard time on the books with Jimmy, AD, and LeBron, all 3 at max contracts. With the Clippers, I don't think Jimmy has a very good foundational system for him to win. And the Knicks are just the fucking Knicks, so I'm not going to spend time on that. And even in Brooklyn with Kyrie, right, how good is that team really? You have Jimmy Butler and Kyrie Irving in a Kenny Atkinson system that values ball movement, player movement. You have 2 ball stoppers, right? So I don't think see that working in Brooklyn with Jimmy and Kyrie there. So I don't think he has a ton of options, and I think he likes him in Philly. I think the Philly fans have really embraced him. He's hit a couple big shots there, and he'll be offering more money in Philly than he can be anywhere else. I think the issue that Philly is facing, though, is what are they going to do about Ben Simmons? So first of all, I don't think they can bring back both Butler and Harris. I think Tobias Harris will leave. I think maybe we'll talk about this next time when we talk about Tier 2 free agents. But I think, somebody where Dallas, for example, or Indiana would probably give Harris the max, right? Dallas can afford the max based on Luka Doncic's timeline. As they can kind of make that work, 3+1, 4+1, or something like that. JJ Redick is really an outlier. He can take a veteran minimum. He can take a mid-level exception, or he can ask for what he's worth. But we'll see about that. I think the biggest question with Philadelphia is what they're going to do about Ben Simmons. Are you really going to offer Ben Simmons the max without him so much as attempting a 3-point shot? For me, that is hard. I think Ben Simmons at this point has a fair amount of trade value. Ironically, you can trade him to probably the two teams where you've made deals already in Phoenix and Minnesota. I think he makes a ton of sense at both those places, right? You trade him to Minnesota for a deal revolving around Josh Okogie, or you take back Robert Covington, or you trade him to Phoenix, revolving around a deal around the lines of Kelly Oubre, Bridges. There's a lot of options out there for Ben Simmons. Definitely, the question is just really, are you gonna keep him without him unable to shoot, and with Jimmy being a primary ball handler towards the end of the fourth? But Philadelphia has made it very clear that they want to go after the championship while Joel is in his prime, which will be the next 3 to 4 years. And I think Jimmy re-signing for the max there makes a ton of sense. So I will predict that Jimmy will re-sign with Philadelphia. So for the fifth and final prediction, I want to talk about the Boston Celtics, right? Because I think the Celtics will be in an interesting situation this off season. I've stated already that I think a lot of the big names will stay home. Kawhi, KD, Clay, Kyrie will go to Brooklyn. I think Jimmy will stay. So your options are really limited. I think Kemba will stay as well. He's more or less said so already. So if you're the Celtics, you have a bunch of young guys who are valuable. You're going to lose Terry Rozier probably. You probably re-sign Al Horford on a multi-year deal to lower his cap. But you're not really in a place where you're a championship contender. So what do you do when you have 3 first-round draft picks this year? You trade for Mike Conley. I think that's something that makes sense, right? The Grizzlies have come out and have said that they're going to draft Ja Morant with the second overall pick. And I can't imagine Ja and Mike sharing a background because they're both very ball-dominant guards. I think it makes a lot more sense for Memphis to try and rebuild with draft picks to go along with Ja and, Jackson. I think that sets Memphis up for a great future. On the Boston side, you are probably going to need a point guard. If Kyrie leaves and if Rozier leaves. Rozier is an unrestricted free agent this summer. I think there's going to be a ton of offers, more than what Boston can pay, because I think Boston wants to maintain that cap flexibility. Both Brown and Tatum will get a pay bump this year, and I think Boston will set themselves up to be with a core of Horford, Tatum, and Brown for better or worse. So you really need a point guard that is mature and can distribute the ball and create his own shot. And I really think that that's Mike Conley. I think there were some suitors for Conley earlier this year for Utah and Indiana, and both make a ton of sense. But I think one of those will get D'Angelo Russell this offseason. I think D'Angelo Russell fits much better with Utah than Mike Conley in terms of timeline. He can grow alongside Donovan Mitchell. Once you have Mitchell, Russell, and Gobert there, I think Utah becomes actually very good. So the trade is as follows. It's Mike Conley in exchange for the 20th and the 22nd or 3rd overall pick this year. I forgot which one it is for now. But from a Grizzly standpoint, they get the chance to draft in the early 20s. This draft, once again, flattens out at about 12 to 15. So they really have a chance to address their wing depth with the 20 and the 22nd overall pick, and hopefully one of them will stick. And for the Celtics, you get Mike Conley. He's an all-star-ish point guard. He is mature enough to play along with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And I think Conley will work much better than Kyrie Irving did. He's not so much of a self-absorbent, narcissistic point guard as Kyrie was. I think the biggest issue with Conley is his health, but I think that will be okay. And this is a minimum risk for the Celtics to give up. In exchange, they kind of get to keep their own pick in the lottery, where they can target another point guard or backup point guard or center to either back up Horford or Conley. And that pretty much wraps up the first episode of the Fengshui Basketball Show. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts. The link is below. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I will love to hear feedback in terms of some things I said. I know some of them are fairly crazy. I don't expect all 5 to actually go through. Once again, if I can hit 3 to 4 out of the 5, I would be fairly happy. And moving on, there's still a ton of other things in the NBA that I would love to address before the free agency. Where Tobias Harris ends up is something really interesting to me. What the Dallas Mavericks decide to do with all their cap space this summer is also interesting. What the fallback plan for both the Clippers and the Knicks will be. It will be fascinating, right? I kind of think that they both will strike out in terms of big names. So what is the plan B for both of those teams? And obviously, if the Lakers don't get AD, if I was wrong on that, what are they going to do there? Something else to keep an eye on, I've heard that the Atlanta Hawks are really interested in trading up to the 3rd spot for RJ Barrett. I think that would make a ton of sense. I think both Trae Young, Kevin Huerter can play off ball. They're great shooters. And in regards to Trae Young, you saw how Steph Curry was shut down by the Raptors this offseason, and I think you're going to see that trend with 6 foot to 6'4" type of point guards like Steph and Trae. So I really think the Atlanta Hawks will be much better taking a ball dominant small forward like RJ Barrett compared to somebody like Cam Reddish, and we'll cover that in more detail next week. So thank you so much for listening to this, and if you have any questions or if there are any topics you want to talk about, please comment below and I will make sure to read them, and I'll see you guys next week.